primal religion. And I question both of those terms, really, primal and religion. So I'm going to start with the question that we brought up for the Terra Nova homework. And this was the question I raised. When I read these anthropological and historical descriptions of primal religion, and those would be from The World's Religions and a History of the World's Religions by Houston Smith and David Noss, two separate books, World's Religions and A History of the World's Religions. When I read these anthropological and historical descriptions of primal religion, I feel, when I read these, I feel primal religion come alive inside myself. Not as if it is something from the past, but something intrinsic to my being. Not all of it, of course, but much of it, much of it. Such as awe before the sacred, feeling a sense of awe before the sacred, a sense of ritual or wanting to engage in ritual and expectancy, like something will happen out of it. Magic, doing magic to bring something about, engaging in prayer, engaging in divination, interpreting signs, symbols, and omens, and animism. Animism, the universe is alive. The universe is alive. That's my rallying cry, right? So what is the difference, I ask myself, between primal religion and the mysticism that permeates all of the, quote, historical religions? And so that's what we set about to look at. But right now we're going to look at primal religion. So first I had to ask myself, in bringing this up, what is religion? What is religion anyway? So I look up the dictionary definition of religion, and it is it means, it's from Anglo-French and Latin religio, and it means supernatural constraint or sanction or religious practices. And it's from religare, which means to tie back. Religare, it sounds like relegate, right? To tie back or to hold back. And it also can mean to link back to something earlier. So it's like a linking or a tying, both constraining, but also tying back to something that has happened before. And it is related to relegate and rely. The word is related to relegate, the words relegate and rely. So rely, interesting, also means to rally, to rally. So it's, again, it's from this Anglo-French relier, which means to retie or to tie together. Again, tie together. So now we have to constrain, to link back to something, and also to tie together. It also means tie out of the way. And it also means a system we come to rely on. We depend on it and we have confidence in it. And it brings people together and rallies people. So religion is about commitment or devotion to a religious faith or observance. These are then the definitions that emerge. So commitment or devotion to religious faith or observance, a personal set or institutionalized system of religious attitudes, beliefs, and practices. Archaically, religion is thought of as scrupulous conformity and conscientiousness. That's how we know we're living correctly. So we're going to conform to it. It is also a cause, a principle, or a system of beliefs held to with ardor and faith. So those are the dictionary definitions of religion, of what religion means. The idea of religion. The reason I wanted to look it up is because of the use in our texts of the term religion, and especially primal religion. Because when I looked at it, I thought, well, primal, is this religion or isn't it religion? Let's think about it. Okay, so primal. So what about the word primal? Okay, that's from the Latin primus, and that means first. So it'd be first religion. Okay, well, first also means original. So it's original, and it also means primitive. And when the term primitive is used, it generally refers to prehistoric, and historic means writing. Okay, so it doesn't have anything to do with writing, primal religion. And I was interested in this other word that follows primitive, and it's called primitivist. If somebody is a primitivist, it means they're committed to non-industrialism, which I thought was a kind of an interesting little sideways entry of something important here. But primitivist, committed to non-industrialism. Okay, primus or primal also means first in importance. Okay, so then here's me coming up, me, Pamela, and I say, okay, if it's original, if it's first in importance, it means it must be something innate, something primordial, something that exists within us or persists from the beginning. It's something original that has been with us the whole time, primal. And this primal, so I'm going to take it to this point, that primal religion, if you want to call it that, begins with some kind of inherent primordial wisdom. And I do want to say that it exists in all of us. This is not something from the past, in my consciousness. Okay, so it turns out David Noss, in A History of the World's Religions, begins his book with primal religions. Interestingly, Houston Smith, in The World's Religions, ends his book with primal religions. For me, between bookended with primal religions, bookending both of our texts like that, I want to say that primal religion is always with us, in the beginning and in the end. And in the end, any kind of discussion that we want to have about it is never going to be able to do it justice, because it is so deep and vast and broad. So we can talk about some characteristics of it, but we're never going to be able to understand the totality of the soul, of this original impulse that exists still within us. Primal is used by David Noss to refer to religions in an original state, confined to a small cultural setting, religions that are not exported. Okay, so that's one of the keys in David Noss. Not exported, so they're not sent out anywhere, they stay in a place. The vital function, he says, of primal religion is to link the visible, everyday world with powerful, unseen forces and spirits that are felt within the people. The essence of it, he says, the key essence is a subject-to-subject relationship with everything surrounding the individual, not a subject-to-object relationship. So subject-to-subject means the cloud is not an object, but the cloud is an other being, like the cloud people, the cloud person, the rock person, the plant person, the coyote person. You know, these are all on, it's subject to subject, and the beings are all interrelated. The primal religions share certain key aspects. So one is, and this will go, of course, through all religions, but one is a creation story. So there's going to be a story that tells of the origin of the universe, of the earth, and earth's beings. Animism is a key feature. Animism means every being is animate, is animated, is alive, and contains indwelling spirit. All beings, both animate and inanimate. So if I take a rock again, the idea of a rock, this rock person, so this rock person contains the indwelling spirit that permeates the entire universe and is alive. And to demonstrate this, how alive it is, I want to share something from Houston Smith. Mainly right now I'm talking about David Noss, what David Noss says, but I wanted to share this little paragraph from Houston Smith, which demonstrates this so well. Okay, and this is page 375 in my volume. There's so many different editions of this book. This one's The World Religions, it's called. It's also got different titles, The World's Religions, and the one I happen to be looking at right now is from 1991. Okay, so listen to this incredible paragraph. Okay, at one point, the art department of Arizona State University decided to offer a course on basket weaving and approached a neighboring Indian reservation for an instructor. The tribe proposed its master weaver, an old woman, for the position. The entire course turned out to consist of trips to the plants that provided the fibers for her baskets, where myths involving the plants were recounted and supplicating songs and prayers were memorized. The plants were alive, and there was no weaving. That before you even get to the point of making the basket, you have to understand the world that you are living in and how interconnected it is and how the plant provides this, and this is where the plant comes from, and it's the plant people, right? Okay, so everything is alive. That's about animism. And then the next key aspect, animism is the first, under the creation story. And then the second one is ceremony and ritual. And thus the ceremony and ritual includes rites of intensification and rites of passage. For example, okay, so a rite of intensification is something that brings power to community values and strengthens community values and increases spiritual potency. And an example of a rite of intensification could be something like a communal dance, or a drumming circle, or a sweat lodge, or a minstrel lodge, or anything like that that just brings power to what the people are doing and intensifies their roles, like a kachina dance or something like that. And generally, these rites of intensification will be taking place around we'll call it the seasons of the year, which are probably organized around the moon cycles, and then also the sun cycle. So at the winter solstice and the summer solstice, something's going to happen. Probably something special is going to happen that's going to intensify the feelings of the community. Then the rites of passage would be ceremonies that mark and celebrate significant events in the life stages, such as birth, puberty, marriage, ordination. He uses the word ordination. Ordination to a special role is going to have something surrounding it, and death. Okay, so for example, in the Hopi culture, something would be presented at each stage, and most notably, for example, clothing. So when the girl has her first menstrual period, she would be presented with a certain kind of outfit and clothing to wear that signifies her status and changing position in the tribe. And in fact, I have this Hopi Kachina corn maiden girl here that I got at Hopi Land, by the way, made out of cottonwood, which the cottonwood tree also has very, very special significance, and then each cottonwood tree would have very special significance. But this would be the outfit, an outfit that would be presented to a girl. Okay, so also another type of ceremony. Oh, let me say another thing about that. The clothing would be, so there would be wedding clothing that would be very particular, for example, and then, for example, and any kind of ordination clothing. So if you had a particular role in the tribe, you would have clothing that would match that. And I'm not just talking about Hopi, I'm talking about generally. And then death clothing. So at death, for example, what you are wearing may depict your entire status of who you are through your life, and that would be given to you very specially. So this would be something that might exist in different primal religions, but definitely exists in Hopi. So you can see, and this is parenthetical, and here's where we start to get into some of the problems. You can see what happens when you have this child taken out of that culture and put into a school, forced to go into a school where they're forced to wear a uniform, and suddenly their entire identity is removed because the very clothing that they're wearing, not to mention everything else, says, this is who I am, this is who we are, and this is who we have always been. Because when we get into primal religion, we are talking about traditional cultures that tend to repeat the same archetypal patterns and pass them down. And we'll get into that more in a minute, because this is part of the conversation I want to be in with you. The next aspect would be totemism. Okay, so what totemism is totems, having totems. And that would be recognition of a special belief between humans and a class or species of animals, for example, or of plants, or inanimate objects. And what this sets up is a mutual relationship of power, and even maybe clanship. Like, for example, you could be a member of the Eagle clan, and that would have a certain kind of power. Or you could be a member of the Bear clan. And, you know, Bear clan in Hopi, I was thinking back at Hopi, because I did part of my Vision Quest experience in 2013 on Hopi land, and I had a lot of teachings, got a lot of lessons that went in very deep. So, and the Bear clan, for example, is leadership clan, and I met an eagle medicine man who told me, so this is just firsthand, and I haven't corroborated this with anything I read, but he told me that people can choose their clan. They don't, their family isn't necessarily all of a clan. If they want to be in leadership position, they could choose the Bear clan, or there are different clans that are dedicated to different things that all work together to create the whole. And again, you know, not all of it, I didn't love everything that he was telling me, but I was open and listening. And so Eagle is very powerful. Eagle is part of the most powerful medicine, for example, in the Hopi clan, and in the Hopi, the Hopi people, with the Hopi people. And in fact, Eagle is probably very predominant all across this continent for the indigenous people. So what he was telling me is that they work together with the eagle. So this is totemism. They work together with the eagle to get the power. The eagle holds the power, and if they can get the feathers from the eagle, they're holding the power, but they also revere and worship the eagle, so it creates a reciprocal relationship. And the eagle is power for hunting and protection. And so, for example, when they're hunting, they take an eagle feather paho, it's called, which is, and you've seen these pahos, they're like fans. I used to think they were all smudge fans, but no, they're not. You know, they're pahos, and they have their own intrinsic power. And so the paho is taken out on the hunt, and everybody's got everyone on the hunt has their paho, let's say, and so like to hunt the rabbits for the group, what they would do is make a big huge circle, a big outline circle with the paho, and take the paho and work with the paho and basically herd the rabbits all to the middle, and that's how they would be able to trap the rabbits, kill the rabbits, for food for the tribe. Well, the way they get the eagle feathers is once a year the eagle clan goes to, they know where the nests are. Some place is very important, the place. The nests, many of the nests are actually as far as 80 miles away. And those places are legendary where the nests are, and they know where they are. And so they go and they take the baby eagles out of the nest in the, I think it's in the spring. I think they're born in the spring. Okay, and then they treat the eagles like babies, and they bundle them up one by one and carry them like papooses back home. And when they get home, they worship them, they treat them like babies, they raise them in their eagle cages and habitats. And then when the birds are about 9 or 10 months old, they're full grown, and they have a big ceremony, and they worship the eagles and revere them, and then they smother them in cornmeal. And then they take the feathers and use the feathers for all of the sacred activities.
So they kill them in the smother?
Mm-hmm.
Do they eat them?
No, they don't. They don't eat them. I don't believe they eat them. Okay, they bury them in a special eagle cemetery. So this is a first-hand talk with the medicine chief 4 years ago. And then I also saw it corroborated somewhere by a Hopi writer, which is very rare. So I'll say something about that in a minute, about the writing. Very, very rare. This is not written down. This stuff is not written down. Okay, and so he was telling me, and this is an aside, but he said they all drove around in their cars with eagle feathers hanging from the rear view mirror, because that was to protect your vehicle. And he said that the U.S. government had come in and told them they can't do that anymore. They can still harvest the eagles. It's an ancient part of their culture, but they may not drive around with them on their rear views. Okay, I'm digressing a little bit now. But so what he told me is, he said, so what we do now is we carve them, eagle feathers, still out of the cottonwood, the sacred trees, but we carve the eagle feather and then we hang it. And he gave me one, which I have hung in my car. And I hope that's the reason I'm still alive. I don't know. But I've got one on my rearview mirror from the eagle chief. But that's what totemism is. It's like establishing a really strong relationship between yourself and the animal. And when the coyote was following me down the trail last week, I asked, why is this coyote following me? What is the meaning of that? Because it is told that animals don't just appear unless they're trying to tell you something or give you some kind of message. With the coyote, I was thinking, ooh, am I going to get some kind of trickster thing going on here? Because that's usually the role of the coyote. So I never did quite figure it out. But that's totemism. And you could have the same kind of relationship with the plant from which you're making the basket. You know, that plant is alive, and maybe you are connected to a particular species of plant or tree. And that can be part of your clan. So in terms of the clans, here's an example of what the clans might be. This is from what has been found carved in petroglyphs all over the Southwest, clan symbols. So the clan symbols include badger clan, bear, bow, as in bow and arrow, bow clan. So it's not always animals. Bow, parrot, water, cloud, butterfly, fire, hawk, crow, kachina, spider, pumpkin, tobacco, and sun. So any one of those clans is going to have a special meaning. And if you wanted to be part of the special meaning of that clan, theoretically you could join that clan. Right now I'm talking about Hopi because I don't know in other groups if you have to be born into a clan or not. But in Hopi, it's different. And I was talking to a Ute Indian last month, and I asked him if he knew the special meaning of the macaw, because I'd been having a lot of dreams about macaw. Well, it turned out, of course, because this is always the way things turn out, that his medicine was macaw medicine, of course, And so his great-grandfather had given him a macaw paho when he was born, and that was going to be his medicine. But he didn't need to keep it if he didn't want to. He could have chosen any other bird. It didn't have to be the macaw. But he loved the macaw because of its beauty. Then because it's blue. It's macaw. It's macaw, blue. Okay, and his little brother, he told me, had also chosen the macaw because of the beauty of the feathers. That's the only reason, just because of the beauty, and because when you're dancing, because pahos are used for dancing too, when you're dancing, that you can flip them and it changes they're usually blue on one side and orange on the other. And so when you flip the fan, it creates a completely different, like it's two different sides of the same color, maybe complementary colors or something like that, like orange and blue, which has a lot of meaning to it. Okay, so that's totemism. It's working with the energies of the animals and the plants. So the next aspect of primal religion that's important is shamanism. So shamanism, the world over in primal religion, and shamans are some individuals who, for whatever reasons, become highly attuned or are highly attuned, either are born that way or become that way or trained to be that way, highly attuned to the spirit world. And the spirit world is the unseen world, and a lot of shamanism is dedicated to healing and also magic. And magic is the next aspect. And magic would be, magic means to do or to make. And magic has to do with warding something off or bringing something in most of the time. So you're trying to keep something away, or you're trying to bring it in, or you're trying to make something happen. So you're enhancing conditions to make that work. So those are the aspects, some of the definitions and aspects raised by David Noss. Okay, so, and the word that I think I left out there that's really important is traditional religion, because sometimes primal religions are referred to as traditional religions. And traditional means that you are, I did allude to this, but that you are repeating the same roles generation after generation. So you would be taking on that role, and that role would relate back to the first time that role ever happened. And I'll give you an example of that. So the example would be hunter. Okay, so you are going to be a hunter, you are going to go out on the hunt. Okay, so what you do, the idea is that you relate yourself back to the first hunter, the archetypal primal hunter that ever existed, who is going to be the best hunter that ever existed, the pure hunter, the primal hunter, the archetypal hunter. Okay, so you call that energy into yourself until you become that energy. And this is something that happens basically worldwide, is calling upon these archetypes that exist in the spirit world. And these archetypes are ancestral. Most of the time they're considered to be ancestral because of the farther back you can go I have to be careful how I say this, because I want to say you're traveling in time space, and that's not really true, because there really is no time space. This archetype exists here and now, and at the same time it's ancestral. So the idea is you call it until it permeates your entire being. And that may be difficult. It may not come easily, but whatever energy you are trying to bring forth, the idea is to occupy it, become it. So, in a sense, there's no time because those archetypes always exist. And you yourself can become that. So you're here now, but you're also taking on the energy of the first hunter, the primordial hunter, the primal hunter. Okay, so now I'm going to fast forward to Houston Smith, and I didn't really go into any of the examples or anything that David Noss provides. He provides a lot, but mainly just the definitions. Okay, now we're going to go to Houston Smith, who puts it at the end of his book. And he says, he begins with the statement that historical religions cover the earth. And historical, when we say historical, we have to refer back to writing. Writing is the thing that differentiates here. Okay, because if it's historical, that means it's been written down. Because it puts the tradition in a different model. It takes it out of an oral model and puts it into a written model. Okay, so Houston Smith begins with the statement, historical religions cover the earth, but they are only the tip of the religious iceberg. They span less than 4,000 years as compared with 3 million years or so of the religions that preceded them, which would be the primal religions. So he defines primal as first, and also tribal and oral. Okay, so what does tribal mean? And the idea behind tribal is that tribal is a small community with an economy that is created by the tribe's own efforts without depending on writing. That's the key. It's not depending on writing, it's not depending on outside sources or forces, and a lot of times these are subsistence economies, because you know that primal religion still exists all around the globe, right? But it is not, it does not interact with other economies. So it's small and in one area. The essence of the primal religion is there aren't, this is now according to Houston Smith, there are not two worlds, the ordinary everyday reality and then the mythic world or some world beyond. Actually, it's all one world. It's all a dream. So it's all part of the dreaming. It's the huge dreaming that contains everything. And we can enter this dream or experience this dream in different ways at different times. So sometimes the dream can appear like ordinary everyday reality, and sometimes it can appear like a spirit world, but it's just all one dream. And generally inside the dream, seasons and generations come and go. So there would be the cycle of seasons, and there would be all the generations. But the backdrop in which everything is occurring, the big picture of the dream, is stable. Time doesn't touch it. And in Australia, they call this backdrop, which is the dream, they call it the everywhen. Everywhen. So that's the word that is used in the everywhen. Okay, this everywhen has these legendary figures inside of it that were the first or the primal beings. And I was mentioning that like with a hunter, there would be like a primal hunter that's like an archetypal energy. But in this everywhen with these legendary figures would be male. Like, what is a legendary male? What is the archetype of male energy? So there would be male, female, human, bird, fish, hunter, basket weaver, etc. So these are all primal archetypes. And then we would bring in this primal archetype into ourselves and assume the powers of that first archetypal being. So, for example, there would be an archetype of, let's say, a birther, a woman giving birth. So, let's say the woman, she's in labor, and what she would do is she would call in the archetype of the original primal birth giver, and she would become that. She would actually be that. It's not that she's calling on guidance from that power. She is that power. She becomes that power. So, and that hunter, the hunter calling on the archetypal hunter for guidance isn't calling the guidance of an outside spirit type of person like we think of it, but rather becoming that energy. You actually become it. Okay, so this is not a focus on worship or of worship. It's rather something that you could call participation in and with, that you are participating with it. And so when you enhance your movement into that merger through ritual, this every when becomes now, and it becomes alive in all the participants or the participant, and there's no mediating force. Like there's no one to go through to reach that experience. It's immediate, it's absolutely direct. Okay, now here's what I really want to get to about this. The key concepts, there are 3 key concepts in this that really define primal religion. One is orality, that's the oral tradition. The next one is place, and the next one is time. So I want to talk about orality first, because this is really interesting to me. Okay, so storytelling is highly respected, and it carries the legacy of the group and intensifies the memory both of the individual and the tribe. So it's both individual and collective as the story is told. Each member of the tribe hears that story and then over time becomes a walking library of the tribe. Everyone has to remember the story, because it's not written down. Right, so you just know the story. So the same story is told again and again and again. So it becomes the collective, individual and collective wisdom of the tribe. Okay, so writing things down becomes very, very problematic when you have an oral tradition. Why? Why would it be problematic? Okay, because if you are committing living myth and legend that you are actually alive inside of to lifeless script, you are actually imprisoning the living spirit. And you are killing the myth and the legend, period. If you want to kill it, write it down. Okay? So, yeah. Isn't that wild? It's very interesting, I think. Yeah. So, because I'm thinking about that. I'm a writer, okay? I write. So I'm really thinking about this. Okay, so to commit living myth and legend to lifeless script is to imprison it and kill the myth and legend, okay? So, number 1. Number 2, writing becomes not a supplement to speaking, not a supplement, but a foe. It's an enemy. It's an enemy, because if you can write it down, you're not hearing it, you're not taking it in, you're not memorizing it. So there goes your memory. You have no memory anymore. You don't have to have a memory. You just go read about it. So under colonial education, this is what's lost, according to indigenous people with primal religion. When we lose orality, we lose, number 1, we lose our direct memory, because now with the writing it becomes mediated. Our memory becomes mediated by something we're reading that's outside of ourselves. And so we lose our direct perception. Number 2, we lose the preeminence of divine disclosure. I'll explain this. Preeminence of divine disclosure everywhere and in everything. Okay, what that means is the divine, the sacred, is speaking everywhere. In every rock, every bush, every tree, every river, every coyote, every plantain plant, everywhere. Okay, but when we start to rely on writing, we lose the idea that divine disclosure is everywhere, and we start to think it's only some places, if that. Okay, and so the writing itself, the book, like the writing or the script or the scroll, becomes preeminent. Not the experience, but it's like the scroll is preeminent. And even further, this goes even further, because since we argue about the meaning of the scroll, it gets written about and written about and written about and translated and retranslated and retranslated until what is true is only based on stuff written about it and not even our own direct perception of the thing itself. So we actually are losing our awareness of the sacred through writing. Okay, this is the argument that's given, right? Okay, so we are paying attention to the writing rather than the direct perception of the sacred universe. And then the third aspect, so the first one is direct memory is what's lost. The second one is the preeminence of divine disclosure everywhere and in everything. And the third one is that writing is secondary material, and writing blurs what is important. Writing is actually secondary. According to primal consciousness, writing is secondary. And then we become blurred, and here's where the mind becomes waterlogged with information, tons and tons of information, while at the same time becoming narrowed and more narrowed through specialization. This is the course of what writing does. Okay, so this is all about orality. So the second concept is place. Place is not space. Space is abstract and place is concrete. Okay, so in this primal reality, space is defined and small, and the area is very well understood. Like the big tree, wherever the big tree is, maybe the big tree is going to be the council tree, and that's where everybody's going to meet, under the big tree, the council tree, and that's where they're going to do a lot of their work, and everybody knows where that is. Or there's an outcropping of rock someplace that has a special meaning. The river means something. Like everything in the place is completely relevant and everybody understands it. And it would be very important not to disrupt anything in the place, because if you were to disrupt it, take it out of its place, then that would create a discontinuity in the matrix. I don't know if matrix would be the word that would be used, but you know, you've heard, don't take anything out of Hawaii, for example, or Pele is going to get you, because you're disrupting the natural continuity of the land, right? So place is not space. Okay, so, and naturally, something like college would be suspect, and I've just myself had some really interesting direct experiences around that, but I want to read you out of Houston Smith about Oren Lyons, who was native, and he went to college. So he returned to his reservation for his first vacation, and his uncle proposes a fishing trip on the lake, and finally is able to get Oren out into the lake where he wants him, in the boat alone. Okay, now here's the discussion that comes about. Well, Oren, his uncle said, you've been to college. You must be pretty smart now from all they've been teaching you. Let me ask you a question. Who are you? Taken aback by the question, Oren fumbled for an answer. What do you mean, who am I? Why, I'm your nephew, of course. His uncle rejected his answer and repeated his question. Successively, the nephew ventured that he was Oren Lyons, an Onondagan, human being, a man, a young man, all to no avail. When his uncle had reduced him to silence, and he asked to be informed as to who he was, his uncle said, do you see that bluff over there? Oren, you are that bluff. And that giant pine on the other shore? Oren, you are that pine. And this water that supports our boat, you are this water. That's the feel, and that is the difference. That is all about place. Okay, thirdly, time. What about time? So we got these three concepts: orality, place, and time. And basically what it adds up to is a paradigm that is a non-industrial paradigm. Okay, so time. Primal time is atemporal. It's the eternal now. The focus is on causality rather than chronology. So not, this happened in 1825, and this happened in 1830, and this happened in 1866. It's not like that. It's more like, well, what's the causality of it? How did this rock get moved from here to here? It's like, that's more the feeling of things. Anything that's considered to be past means closer to the source, closer to the primal, closer to the first energies. So the more removed people become from those archetypal first energies, the more things are thought to be ravaged. And so if we want this unravaged reality, we can go to the elders and the ancestors, which would be highly revered. And so that, again, like calling in those energies from the ancestors. So that's a difference. And then, so with this structure of the primal world, people are embedded in their world. They're contained inside this web of tribal relationships, and the tribe is embedded in nature. Then totemism creates a social and ceremonial whole held together by rituals and ceremonies of cooperation, where people are always like all the clans would work together, each one doing their different function. Everything exists as a reality in its own right, and everything is sacred. For example, a river or a lake or a rock, every single thing that is, every being contains and shows or radiates its divine source. And it's transparent. It's transparent and radiating into the universe. Okay, so basically, in conclusion here, primal peoples are not primitive or uncivilized, according to Houston Smith, but they are different from industrialized people. There's a different way of knowing by which they are set apart. So, yeah, for example, they would see writing as being totally extraneous. It has nothing to do with what's real, right? You can follow that now, right? It has nothing to do with what's real. And the way in which all things are seen is interconnected, and all things are seen as interconnected and sacred. Now what's happening in a strange flip of history, you might say, since industrialism has gone so far to destroy people and the planet, large numbers of industrialized people are now seeking new ways of knowing. Therefore, primal consciousness, once thought to live at the beginning of history, the beginning of the book, now we find it at the end of the book. And we are trying to learn something, realizing that here were people who, though it may not be a panacea in any way, but we're living in a different kind of harmonious relationship with the world. Okay, so, and now insofar as we are collectively seeking a new story, a story of health, and a story of interconnection, a story of meaning and deepening, we are trying to renew our own sense of what is sacred. So we are reaching into solutions where we can find them. And one of the places that we are reaching into is this primal consciousness within ourselves, because it brings us back to something really primal within us. And if we can go forward with mutual respect, we may be able to learn from primal consciousness and begin to move our collective story forward and work toward better solutions for our planet. Okay, so obviously this is just the beginning of this story. And I do want to end with, I want to read you a poem from Standing Rock, a poem called Divide and Conquer. So this is my book that I just finished. Okay, Divide and Conquer. So, okay, so here's how this story goes. And so I feel myself a bit caught between worlds. I am a writer. I am one of the people who destroys primal consciousness. At the same time, I know that this is part of my history for a very long time, the writing, and I feel like I have all of that inside me, both the primal consciousness and the colonial consciousness, if you will, which symbolizes and lifts the writing up. Here's another one you'll love. There's no word for art in primal culture. Mm-hmm. Everything is art. That's the difference. It's all art. Life is art. Okay, which I love too. Okay, Divide and Conquer. The chairman of the Standing Rock Sioux says, from the outset, the Texas oil company that owns the Dakota Access Pipeline was exempt from the environmental studies and reviews required by the Clean Water Act and the National Environmental Policy Act because the Dakota Access Pipeline was fast-tracked under Nationwide Permit Number 12. Under Nationwide Permit Number 12, the construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline is treated as a series of small construction sites, as if the waters of the Missouri, 2,540 miles long, the greatest river in the United States, which carries water through 2 Canadian provinces and 31 states through the United States to the Gulf of Mexico, could be divided into discrete sites, and spilled oil would stop moving at some theoretical line of division. The Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of the Interior, and the National Advisory Council on Historic Preservation all stated that meaningful consultation with those impacted by this venture was imperative, most notably the many Native American tribes, the ranchers and the farmers, and the other inhabitants of the cities and towns all along the Great River, all those millions who depend on the Missouri for drinking water and irrigation, but that never happened. And the Dakota Access Pipeline was approved by the state of North Dakota and the Army Corps of Engineers regardless. David Archambault, too, chairman of the Standing Rock Sioux, says, this shows how Native American tribes continue to pay the price for America's prosperity. The pipeline, he says, is not aligned with a safe and responsible vision for future generations. As Chief Sitting Bull said a century ago, let us put our minds together and see what life we can make for our children. David's words pierce me like a dagger. I am sensing great danger in this pipeline endeavor. We have power sources other than oil, many available in relatively short order, but until the end of the earth, nothing can replace water. Meanwhile, down under, on the other side, New Zealand, after a 160-year battle, is granting the Wanganui River, Te Awa Tupawa, the legal status of a person. The river will represent its own interests and advocate on its own behalf. 2 people will represent it, one appointed by the Maori tribe, the other appointed by the government. The Maori, whose life depends on the water, say, we do not use the river, we exist with the river. From the beginning, the Maori have believed, I am the river and the river is me. In 2010, Bolivia passed the law of Mother Earth, granting nature these rights, the right to life and to exist, the right to maintain vital cycles free from human alteration, the right to balance and not to be polluted, the right not to have cellular structure modified or genetically engineered, the right not to be affected by mega infrastructure and development projects that affect the balance of ecosystems and the local inhabitant communities. Bolivia created the Ministry of Mother Earth and designated funding to enforce these measures. In 2008, Ecuador passed a similar ruling, giving forests, lakes, and waterways the same protection as humans to ensure their safety against harmful practices that result in environmental degradation. It has been determined that the Wanganui River in New Zealand is one mighty river from beginning to end. She does not live in one village or another, but everywhere within her body. Maori Party co-leader Marama Fox says, "We now have a chance to restore Te Awa Tupua to its life-giving essence, and in so doing, to gift back to the Wanganui River tribe their rightful obligations and responsibilities to the river that runs through their veins." All right, that is what we are looking at. That is what we are facing. That is what is behind us, and that is what is in front of us. And I will end with that.